Today we sat down with Matt Magnuson. He is an ultramarathon runner, an endurance athlete, and runs the ICRYO here in Wichita, Kansas. We learned a lot about alternative healing techniques, about overcoming adversity, and many more things. We really hope you enjoy this one.
All right, we're up. Matt, thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
You have a really unique story. So you lost almost 100 pounds, got into marathon running, and then unfortunately involved in a pretty significant car accident, hit by a drunk driver, which really injured your back. You rehab back from that, and now you're running ultra marathons. And you also opened up ICRYO on the west side. What a story, man.
Thanks, I appreciate it. Very blessed to be where I'm at.
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind, just take us to the beginning.
Beginning, okay. So we'll start with the weight loss part then, huh?
Yeah.
So, throughout my 20s and early 30s, I didn't ever think about fitness at all. When I got into my late 20s, I was well over 200 pounds at that point. So I started several years of yo-yo dieting. Back then the Atkins diet came out, so I just eat low carb, hardcore for 3 months, maybe 6 months, lose 40, 50 pounds. I'd get on a workout routine. And then for whatever reason, I would just stop and go back, be satisfied. I've lost this weight, and get satisfied and go back to the old habits, which, included, a lot of processed foods, lots of sugar, and way too much booze. And so after going through that cycle for a long time, I hit this point where it was time to make permanent changes. I had my daughter was about to be born. For being a first-time dad, I wasn't necessarily the youngest guy. I was 36. And so there was kind of that realization that, my kid graduates high school, I'm going to be well into my 50s. By the time she's, out of college, I'm going to be in my 60s, so kind of doing that math and thinking about where I'm at with my life at that point, I knew that it was probably not sustainable. I also, through looking at the older generation, specifically my parents' generation, just noticing, my folks, they ate well and stayed active, and, and comparing them and other people who had those lifestyle habits to the people who didn't, and noticing that as they transitioned through their 50s, which I just turned 50 a couple months ago. But as I noticed them transition through their 50s, they aged entirely different. I even some of my parents' friends, I would notice, man, they look like 10 years older. And, when they get up off the chair, they're slow to move around and complaining about pain and just mobility issues, and really not that old when you think about it, especially then, So I knew that what I was doing wasn't sustainable. Now, I'd like to say that I gave up the alcohol right away. That would come later down the road. But I just started a journey of eating better and exercising. And about 2-3 months into that routine, I decided to do the Couch to 5K plan. Now, I'd never been a runner, as a child growing up, or, at any point, I actually hated running. But my thought was, if I can get up to the point where I can run a 5K, and I could do that like 4 times a week, I'll lose weight faster. And then the plan is I'll just keep doing that after I hit my goal, and then that'll help me maintain, with really no intentions of ever doing a half marathon. I even thought, well, I probably can't get up to that level, and definitely not, that marathon level. And then what happened is I got to the point where I could do that 5K. And after about 3-4 months of that, there was one day I'm like, I bet I could go 5 today. Let's just try it. Oh, wow, I did 5. It wasn't that bad. And a couple weeks later, hey, I could do a 10K. That's only 1.2 more miles. Let's stack that on there. And, that progression continued. Next thing you know, I'm doing 10 miles. And then I remember one day, or one night going to bed, and I was really motivated and I was really happy with my running. And this is actually on a weekday too. I'm going to get up extra early tomorrow, and I'm going to run my first half marathon, and then I'm going to go to work. And so got out of bed at 4:00. It took me about 2.5 hours to run that first half marathon. Then I showed up at work, and then I'm like, okay, later that day I signed up to do the Prairie Fire Fall half marathon. And, the year after that, I did the full marathon, and really, embraced running and had a lot of fun with it. And all told, would do 7 marathons. And I actually, after I completed that 7th one, I backed off. I really I felt like I was in running shape, but I just wasn't in good physical shape, that I needed to, I kept getting small little running injuries, and I didn't have very good core, didn't have good flexibility. And, at this point, I'm in my 40s. So, I decided I'm going to scale back a little bit from the running. I'm only going to do half marathons, but because I'm only doing half marathons, I can also work on my speed and get a little faster. But, I started cross training and lifting, doing some yoga, and really got to the point where I was in the best shape of my life at that point. And then that's when the car accident happened. And then everything just kind of went crazy from that point.
Weight loss requires such a significant lifestyle change. So I've lost almost half of that, a little less than half of that. So I'm about 160 now. I was almost 200 a couple years ago. Mm-hmm. And one thing I noticed is how significant your life needs to change to be able to do it. You have to say no to a lot of things. People ask you, hey, I'm going out tonight for drinks. You want to come? No, I'm getting up early and working out in the morning. It takes so much, a complete lifestyle shift of what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it ultimately helps build discipline. I think,
right.
At that point in my life, I had a decent career, but outside of that, I just really didn't have, much discipline in my life. And I can say that, when I got to that point of, what's cool about running as kind of that activity is there's so many ways you can set goals, whether it's this month I want to run 100 miles, or there's a 5K coming up in 3 months and I want to break 22 minutes, or I want to have a streak of running every day for X amount of days. I mean, there's just between speed and distance and weekly distance, monthly distance, yearly, you can do so much different goal setting. And I got in that cycle of goal setting and conquering those goals through running. And then, kind of that light bulb goes off in your head. Well, what if I applied this discipline to these other areas of my life, and it really, people see the outward side of the weight loss, and, I could show this before and after picture of, but the picture, just the visual really doesn't tell the story. The story, is, the journey of what got you there and what you learned and who you were before and who it changed, how it changed you besides just that physical appearance.
That's exactly right. And something I've noticed is it impacts other parts of your life too. Impacts your work life, impacts, everything else you want to do a little bit better, a little bit harder. And I think that just starts with exercise.
Yeah. One of the things I noticed really quickly is it made me mentally sharp,
yes.
and improved that quite a bit. I used to be the guy that would show up to work at 8, grab a cup of coffee, sit in front of the monitor for like 10, 15 minutes, and just try to get going. When I went down that weight loss journey, and having a young child at home, I knew that I couldn't work out in the evening. And the other thing is too, I know that for me personally, workouts in the evening only actually happen about 50% of the time because there's interruptions. But at 5 a.m, like, who's going to interrupt you? Nobody. The world is still asleep, right? So you don't have those interruptions. So I became a 4:30 guy. I got up consistently at 4:30, hit the pavement at 5:10, get that workout in. Then when I'd get to work, I'd sit down in front of my desk. I am just ready to go. I'm charged up. I already have a win for the day, and now I can win. I had that good workout. I've got that off of my list, and now I can roll that win into whatever the day has in front of me and build momentum.
You said, have you cut booze completely?
I have, yeah. That would come several years later.
Yeah. How hard was that, and what changes have you seen from cutting booze completely? Because I've always thought, we drink, but I'm like, man, I would be so much more productive and obviously healthy if I just cut it.
Yeah, you would. I mean, there's, I think that, like a lot of things with moderation, it's not horrible. I think that, if you, I can't tell you the last time I've been drunk, that's been so many years, and, hangover so many years. Have I had a beer or two
Lucky.
since then on vacation? Yeah. But, but yeah, just, I'm at the point in my life where I don't really need it socially. So there's really not that aspect. And, from a health perspective, even if I'm only having one a week. Well, that's an extra 150 calories that I could, maybe have ice cream instead. So, if I'm going to have those cheat calories, right?
Yeah, that's a solid point.
But, at the end of the day, I think that there's no net positive that happens with alcohol.
Yeah, you're exactly right. So when you were hit by the drunk driver, you were rear-ended, right?
I was, yes. And I was behind an F-150 at a light, and I was in a Camaro, so much lower. So when I got rear-ended, then I rear-ended the truck in front of me. So actually, I took most of the damage from rear-ending the guy in front of me, I think. So the double collision.
Yeah, God. How mentally challenging was that? So you lost all that weight, and then you're forced to be stagnant, probably because of your back injury. Like, I just think about how tough that would be for me, just sitting there and not being able to do anything after losing all that weight.
Yeah, it was definitely an interesting time in my life. Definitely, when people say, "Man, I'm sorry you went through all that," when I tell the story, I always tell them, I'm not sorry. I mean, the journey was, now that I'm on the other side of it, the journey was amazing. And it much like the weight loss had a life transformation for me, so did the injury recovery. But to start out with, it put me in a very difficult or very, very, very dark spot. Let's just say that. I had, and we don't need to get into it, but the couple years leading before the car accident, there was a lot of life events that had happened as well. So, I had 3 friends die unexpectedly, 2 of them within the same week. My family got hit with a lawsuit. It was kind of a silly troll type of situation is the best way to explain it. We ultimately won, but it was one of those things that you pay your attorney
Sure.
$1,500 a month for about a year and a half to make the problem go away, right? So we, and some career things as well at that time. So it was just a very stressful time going in those couple of years. And then it was like, I remember January 2018, brand new year. And I'm like, this is the year that we're going to race 2016 and 2017, everything that happened. And then that car accident happened on January 3rd. So when the car accident happened, it was actually, my injuries were actually thought to be much lighter than what they were. I was initially told by my doctor, "Hey, you're looking 3 to 4 months and you'll be okay." And then we get to about that fourth month, and I'm maybe 10% okay. I'm in pain nonstop. From the time I wake up till the time I go to bed. Just even the process of sitting up and then, getting out of bed and getting in the shower and getting dressed, getting shoes on. It was just a difficult process to go through every day. And then you also think, you have a wife and kid at home, and, as a man of the house, you're used to doing certain things. I couldn't even mow the lawn, or do, a lot of simple household projects. So, you're asking, you're putting a lot of the burden, on my wife, and then, also, asking for help all the time, which is something I don't necessarily like to do. So there was that component. And then there's the component of, how are all my doctor bills going to be paid? You see all the TV commercials, getting a wreck, get a check and all that. And there's a reason that you see all those commercials, and that has to do with the way that the laws are set up in Kansas, which that would be a podcast episode in itself. So I'll spare you guys the details. But, if you get hit by the UPS truck, you're okay. It's going to rain those dollars on you that you see in the commercials. But if you get hit by a 36-year-old who makes, $40,000 a year and has, just the lowest limits of liability as his insurance, you're not going to see very much. And so, but in any case, you have to go through the legal process to even get that and kick back a third of it to the lawyer. So you're going through that process. And then, as mentioned, I was hit by a drunk driver. So obviously there was some a legal process that he went through that as the victim, I had to come along for part of that ride as well. So, but then it's also the doctor's appointments. The first year, I went to the doctor 145 times in 1 year.
Wow.
And now I'll also, full transparency, I got to the point where I was trying to throw everything at it, so I was going and getting second and third opinions from different PTs, different chiropractors. But in any case, you figure if you're going to the doctor 2-3 times a week, when's the doctor open? Well, when you're supposed to be working, right? So you're leaving in the middle of the workday, which means that, you're working late or taking work home late. So, that just, rolls into, all of your free time, your family time. So, after, 9, 10, 11 months of this, it just put me in just a bad spot. My temperament was just absolutely horrible. I feel bad for any of my employees who worked for me back then. My family had to take on a lot of that. It all came down to, there was one day in particular. So, it was, 11 months after my accident, and I had just got back into town a couple weeks prior. I had, my cousin had passed away, and then, or actually my uncle passed away, and then my cousin passed away the very next day. So I had 2 funerals to go to, one in Montana, one in Canada. And these weren't cities I could fly to. So it was fly, then drive. And, so it was like the 6-day trip, but 5 days of being in a car or airplane or both, and not going to, not getting any treatment during that time, as well as, just at that point, anytime I had any type of prolonged sitting, it just made everything worse because, my spinal injury, right? So I get back from this trip, and I kind of regressed a little bit in my recovery, and I was just in pain. And I this particular Sunday, I'm sitting on the couch, and I get up and I stand up, and I just immediately fall down because I can't hold myself up. I'm in that much pain. It's just excruciating. And there's this few moments of full emotions where I'm cussing, I'm yelling, I'm screaming, I'm crying, anything you could think of. And I thought, this probably isn't good for my family to see. I should, go downstairs. So I went downstairs in the basement, and I prayed a little bit, and just kind of just was really hopeless. And, about a year before the accident happened, I actually got back into church and slowly, rebuilding, my relationship with God. And that was around the time that I really decided, it's time to kick booze and all that, which was very ironic. I had, got my booze under control. They got hit by a drunk driver. But, so I'm downstairs praying, and, I just feel this presence of God say, hey, you know what, you're going to get better, and you're going to use this experience to help others. And, and then it was also, I kind of started feeling this like rehab plan develop in front of me. And what I mean by that is I'd gone to, like I said, 145 doctor's appointments in the first year, but, we were almost at the end of the road of things that they could do for me, right? So I knew that what I had been told is I could try doing the epidural steroid shots, which they had actually tried to get me to do that like 9 months before. But I'm like, I'm kind of the natural health guy, I don't really want to put that in my body. But I decided, you know what, we're going to do we're going to do anything that they recommend up to surgery. And then if they say that all you can do is surgery, then I'm going to go in on 2 things that I've noticed have been helping me. One of those things is cryotherapy. I had just discovered cryotherapy not long before then, and feeling the benefits of it. And the other thing was DDP yoga. And so I was doing the combination of those as part of my rehab, and I was actually feeling like I was noticing I was progressing. I still wasn't 100%. So I went ahead and did these steroid shots, and they were, I don't know, they lasted like 3 or 4 days a piece. I mean, it was just very, very short term. And then, I went to the doctor for the follow-up visit and said, hey, this isn't working. He said, well, I mean, what's next? It's surgery. You got to do surgery, and that's it. And, I was 40, I think I was getting ready to turn 42 at the time, or 43, somewhere in there. And just kind of mathing it out. I don't know anybody who's ever had just one back surgery. It seems like the first back surgery is the gateway to the second and the third. So, I'm thinking if I have a back surgery every 7-8 years and I live to be 80, That's a lot of back surgeries. And I don't know, and maybe it's just me, but it seems to me that anybody that I know that had ever had back surgery still had back pain. It wasn't as bad, but they still had back pain, and I was on the mission to just be pain-free. And so I knew that once you start putting bolts and screws and all of that inside your body, you're at the point of no return of being able to do anything with it naturally. So there was actually a lot of peace of mind that came when the doctor said, "Oh, you can have a surgery," because I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go all in with this recovery plan that I have. And so I had, that fall before, I was, I guess 8-9 months into the recovery is when I found the right PT as well. So I was going to use what the PT gave me. DDP yoga, cryotherapy. And, you always hear people talk about write down your goals and review your goals. Well, I'm a spreadsheet geek, right? So I put everything in Excel. So I just made this Excel spreadsheet, and it was, this is how many minutes I'm going to do per week of DDP yoga. And
what's DDP yoga?
DDP yoga. Have you ever heard of the professional wrestler from the 90s, Diamond Dallas Page?
I don't think so.
No, you guys are a little bit younger. So he was sure you've heard of Hulk Hogan.
Yeah, rest in peace.
Yeah, definitely. So Diamond Dallas Page is probably most famous for this tag team match that he had, him and Karl Malone versus Hulk Hogan and Dennis Rodman, and it just happened to take place
Wow. I had no idea that happened.
Oh, go look this up on YouTube. This was like the summer of '98. It was like one of the coolest things ever, because they entered. A lot of wrestling obviously is a bunch of hype, a lot of the promos, and so a lot of this was intertwined with the NBA Finals, because that year the Chicago Bulls were playing the Utah Jazz. And so there's even parts on the court, where they're in the games where they're getting physical, and even Bob Costas mentions that they've got this fight coming up, because I think this event was probably about 3-4 weeks after the finals ended. So Diamond Dallas Page was a professional wrestler in the 90s, but he didn't get started till he was 35 years old. So he was very late to the game. And when he was 40, he broke his back. And his wife at the time was a yoga enthusiast, and he was, trying to do everything he could to rebuild his back. And long story short, he started doing the yoga that she was doing, but then kind of worked with a chiropractor who was a yoga instructor, and they ended up developing this particular type of yoga that it still has a lot of your basic yoga fundamentals in it, but also intertwined is physical therapy, rehab movements, and then just some old school calisthenics. So if you do a typical DDP yoga workout, you're going to have some squats in it. You probably might have some planks and some slow burn push-ups, different, some crunches, things like that, is while doing, the other traditional yoga moves that you're familiar with. So yeah, I just did the combination of those three things, and then the pandemic starts. And so I had all this extra free time, and I'm like, I'm doing all this yoga anyways. I should just become an instructor, because because of the pandemic. Normally when you're a yoga instructor, you got to do so much in classroom teaching, right? Because there were special circumstances with the pandemic where I only had to have one person with me, and then I could do the rest on like Zoom, right? So I was doing most of my students while I was student teaching were actually virtually. But my thought process at the time was, well, I got to figure out what this thing was that God told me how I'm going to help other people. And I'm also a firm believer too, that if you want to master a skill, one of the best ways to do that is to teach other people the skill. And so by learning to become an instructor, I became much better at doing the movements. And so, the flexibility that I have as a 50-year-old man, I mean, I'm more flexible than probably most 17-year-old boys, on the high school football team, right? So, but what I'll tell you is it's paid off. I have spinal stenosis, but I move around better than the average 50-year-old, and I can get off the couch after sitting down for a long period of time. So, using that combination of those three things really propelled me. So, from that date that I wrote down all those goals, I'm going to do this much of this each day. of each of these elements of my recovery plan, I was able to make a full recovery about 14 months after. So 32 months in total.
So you said no to surgery and just dove into that, and within 14 months you were feeling.
Well, 14 months after being told surgery was the option. Yeah, right. I just dove in entirely with that. I should also mention the entire 32 months, never took one pain pill, never took one muscle relaxer.
Wow.
The day I remember I got, my doctor, he's like, you got to take these prescriptions, wrote them. And I went and even had them filled at Walgreens, and I got home and I looked at the bottle, and, I know that they were telling me a 3-month injury, but man, I just knew so much. I've seen the damage that pain pills had done to people. I'm like, 3 months might be too long to take pain pills. I mean, and given my history with alcohol, I knew that it was a little too risky. So I ended up just throwing it away. At the time, I had no idea that I was going to be dealing with this for 32 months, not 3 months. So, it's just amazing the timing of how everything worked, because, if this accident happened 10 years before, do you think I have the discipline to do all that rehab work to rebuild my body? I wouldn't have. I would have had the surgery, and I probably would have taken the pain pills, and my life would have had a completely different trajectory at that point. If I hadn't gotten in shape and built that discipline and built up that desire to just improve myself.
9 out of 10 people or more would go down that path versus what you did. Surgery and pain pills. That's just what we do in society.
Yeah, good for you on not taking any pain pills. That is a dirty industry, man.
Yeah, it really is. And it's a lot of why we opened ICRYO. My goal was, if I can just get one person off of pain pills, everything I do here is completely worth it. And I can tell you, we've got a lot more than one person off pain pills. So it's a good thing.
It's ruined millions of people's lives. That is one of the dirtiest industries out there, man.
It has, and I know that we all have stories too of, somebody that, whether it's somebody in our family or somebody that we know that's put themselves in really bad places. And I just didn't want to risk it. I thought it would be just easier to live with the pain, but, then the pain just became intolerable, and that's how I discovered cryotherapy. I had heard, somebody had told me about cryotherapy was nursing a nagging running injury a couple years before. And I'm like, that sounds like the stupidest thing I've ever heard.
Can you explain what cryotherapy is?
Yeah. So, and I'll give you a better explanation than the first explanation that I had. So what it is, it's a chamber that you get in, and the one that we have at ICRYO is very roomy. It's like being in an oversized coat closet. And it is chilled to around negative 170 degrees Fahrenheit. So you get in there basically half naked. So guys are just wearing shorts, socks, slippers, and then a mask to cover your nose and ears, and then gloves for your hands. And you stand in there for 3 to 3.5 minutes at this cold temperature. And what it's just think of it as like a high tech ice bath, right? It's when you get in there, because it is so cold, it's going to cause your body to immediately go into fight or flight. It's going to trigger a response. It's going to make the blood from your extremities rush to your core to protect your organs. And in that process, it's going to reoxygenate the blood. And then when you step out of the chamber, that fresh oxygen is going to go to parts of your body that have pain and inflammation. But it's also giving you that same numbing effect that you would get from doing a cold plunge. So you're kind of getting a 2-for-1 there. On top of that, because your whole body is, these newer cryo chambers, your entire body's in there. It stimulates the vagus nerve, which controls your body's natural production of both melatonin and serotonin. So when you step out of that chamber, you're just ready to take on the world. Like anything bad that happened that day, it's like just reset. It just completely puts a reset on the day. And I like doing it like an hour after lunch. When I'm starting to get a little tired, starting to think about grabbing a soda or an energy drink and know that I shouldn't, and just go do cryotherapy, and then I'm good to go for the rest of the day. But then on top of that extra production of melatonin makes sleep much, much better. In fact, that's one of the biggest pieces of feedback that I get from any of my friends who have come in and tried it. I'll get a text the next morning, dude, I slept for 10 hours straight. I haven't slept that hard in years. Like, what's up? I'm like, well, that's that extra melatonin.
That's fascinating.
That is
I've
fascinating.
heard the same thing about sauna use in sleep. That if you get in the
try it.
sauna, I think at any point in the day, there's studies on really enhanced sleep.
Yeah, the sauna is so good for you in so many ways.
Yeah,
it does help with sleep. It helps with circulation. Regular sauna use can lower all cause mortalities by over 40%. It's a great detox. When you especially if you get in an infrared sauna.
Yep.
If you get in a traditional sauna or you just go out and work out really hard and you sweat up a storm, about 97% of that sweat is just going to be water and salt, and 3% of it's going to be toxins. You get in an infrared chamber, and because of the way that the infrared heat waves penetrate into your muscle tissue, it heats you from the inside out and really pushes out more toxins out of your body. I do it so often that I can tell what my diet has been just by how bad I stink. And what I mean by that is if I've been eating clean, I can go in the sauna and I can sweat up really, and I don't smell anything. But let's say it's my first sauna session after Christmas break, and I've been eating pies and I've been eating all kinds of gluten and all kinds of sugar, and I'm going way off the rails. I get in the sauna and I start sweating. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm gross smelling, but so it's definitely good for detoxification as well.
There's also, I've seen great studies, I think out of Finland, that sauna use in Alzheimer's prevention. Mm-hmm. If you sauna, I think it was 4 times a week, there's a substantial decrease in the chance that you get Alzheimer's down the road.
Yeah, it's amazing. And in fact, in Finland, I think it's over 60% of households actually have saunas in their house. It's just that common there.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. It's so interesting that we're just kind of figuring all this stuff out now.
Yeah, cryotherapy was invented in 1978 in Japan, and it was developed as a treatment for rheumatoid arthritis. And it just never caught on here. And then it got big in Europe, I want to say in the 90s, maybe early 2000s. But 10 years ago, there was less than 100 places in the U.S. that you could get cryotherapy. And now there's about 2,000 places across the country, 2 in Wichita. Pretty much every NFL training facility has a cryo chamber. I know that most of the NBA teams, MLB, a lot of your big FBS level schools, especially in the SEC, they have cryo chambers. It's just, it's an amazing tool, not only just for pain management, which is what I used it for, but it's amazing for athletes. And that was one thing that, I started doing cryotherapy and I had never done it before the accident. And, after I'd been dabbling with cryotherapy for several months, I'm thinking to myself, if I would have known that this worked, I would have been here during marathon training every Saturday after doing my Saturday long run, and on Mondays after doing races, and maybe once or twice, during the middle of the week, just tune up my body, but I didn't really, know that it existed at that point. But it's so good for athletes, but, even above and beyond that, amazing for fibromyalgia. It's also good for several different skin conditions like eczema and psoriasis, even acne. We see teenagers that come in and jump in the cryo chamber and they're able to get their acne cleared without having to put prescription, gels all over their body to clear it up.
Wow. That is fascinating stuff. How often do you do it? On average?
I'd say usually about 4 days a week. More if I can.
You sauna the same?
I sauna probably about twice a week. No, I'd like to more. It's just that whole work-life training and recovery and all that, the balance between it all. One of the workouts that I do in the sauna, one of my sauna sessions is actually a workout where I go early in the, and actually today, it's Tuesday. It's my Tuesday morning workout. I get in there at 130 degrees. And I do 500 push-ups and 500 squats.
Oh yeah, that'll do it.
Oh, you are a barbarian.
So I can burn about 600 to 700 calories during that workout, which would take me, I'd have to run 5 or 6 miles to get that same calorie burn. But then I'm also getting all the benefits of the sauna out of it as well. And the other thing that it's doing is it's just mental toughness training. I mean, it's by far the worst workout I have all week. Those last 15 minutes, I'm just asking myself why I still do this, and I'm just mad. And then I get done. I'm like, all right, I've conquered the hardest workout I'm going to do all week. But it helps, run in the heat. I don't have problems with the heat that a lot of other runners do. And I think it's because when I'm doing that workout, I'm consistently into zone 4, sometimes in zone 5, and I'm still, and at 130 degrees, 140 degrees. So when I'm outside running, and if I can just keep my heart rate in zone 2, zone 3, when it's 95 to 100 degrees, it's much more manageable because I've stressed my body out much harder. So now this feels like taking a step backwards.
Right.
It's great how people are becoming so aware about cold exposure and heat exposure being good for you. Dude, the big pharmaceutical industry, I think they've purposely gone out of their way to hide that from us, just to keep us on pills, and by spending money, advertising, and funding politicians' campaigns. It's great that people are now seeing through that BS and finding real, legitimate, what's the word I'm looking for, like normal ways to get better, normal remedies, rather than relying on these stupid pills that are ruining people's lives.
Yeah, I think, I like to tell a story about how I used to take at least anywhere between 2 to 4 medications a day for allergies. I had really bad allergies. On top of that, I went through almost 20 years of experiencing gut pain. And I was on at least 1 to 2 daily medications for a long time for that stuff. I can, without going into the whole journey, I'll just tell you that over that time, me and my doctor never talked about sleep, food intake, stress management, water consumption, exercise. Now, during most of that time was during the unhealthy years of my life. What I found through, I didn't learn the proper way to eat that I do now. When I was going down that diet journey, I was learning, and there's a lot of things that took me several years to learn. But I eventually landed on what I call, just simply put, the diet where you eat God's food and not man's food. And what I mean by that is, what if you went to a grocery store 100 years ago? What would that grocery store look like? Well, it would look like what you see at the perimeter of the grocery store today, and you wouldn't have any of the aisles, because all the stuff that's on the aisles is all manufactured stuff. It's all the stuff with preservatives. It's all built for a shelf life. It's all built to be addictive. It's all built to be cheap. And you look at, the ingredients list, you can't pronounce half of them. They've got 20 different things on there. You couldn't pick up this bag of whatever and read all these ingredients on it and then find all those ingredients and go home and make it on your own, right? Because some of these things are exclusive to the lab, but yet we're putting it in our bodies. And I switched, through, I've done every diet. I've done vegan, paleo, Atkins, keto. And if you take the best of any diet and you do it exactly the way that you should, you're just eating whole foods at the end of the day. You're just eating meat and produce. And if you can get it, the produce organic, and if you can get the meat from a butcher or, better yet, even a farmer, buy a side of beef, you're even better off. But stay away from the food that man made, and just stick with the food that God made. And it's just amazing how much healthier you feel. And when and part of that is gluten, man. I always thought gluten-free was a fad. And then what actually got me, I told you I had this food journey. I decided at one point I was going to be vegan, and I wanted to do vegan the exact vegan way. And I did, and I started feeling better. And then, the holidays that year hit, and I, ate, typical holiday food, right? You're going to enjoy and celebrate. And I just started feeling achy and sore. I'm like, oh.
Like in the gut or everywhere?
In the gut, but yeah, otherwhere. Just my joints feeling a little bit sore, and just my overall energy level. I'm just feeling just slightly sluggish. I'm just, maybe lagging 10% behind where I'm normally at. Yeah, just knowing that things aren't feeling right. And that's when that light bulb went off. I'm like, maybe it's the gluten, And so, that was a long time ago. I cut that out. But, after doing that whole food period for a long time, I eliminated all those medications, and so to your point that you made about the pharmaceutical companies, and any marketing or business class you take, one of the things you learn is you want to acquire that lifetime customer. Well, the pharmaceutical companies are no different. Somebody who has chronic gut pain for them for 60 years, much more valuable as a patient than somebody who's just going to go to change the way that they grocery shop and fix the problem on their own.
Bingo.
So dirty.
Bingo. That's exactly it. That's so dirty. It's terrible.
It is terrible.
Hopefully, I don't know. Hopefully people keep spreading the word and it keeps getting out. And
I think people are becoming more aware. I think post-pandemic, people are starting to wake up to a lot of that. It's obviously moving very slow, but I think that there is much more awareness to processed foods being bad and specific things being super bad, like glyphosate. I mentioned gluten earlier. Just the amount of sugar that's in everything. I don't
hear about that red dye 40.
Right.
Yeah.
The
that's
red dye,
everything.
Corn syrup, I think that most people didn't know about all that.
No.
And I think a lot of it is, I always go back to, growing up in the 80s, when you went to school, they showed you the food pyramid. I don't know if that was around by the time
that was a lie. The food pyramid is a lie.
It is.
It was still there when we were
still there. Yeah,
it.
still there.
You literally need to turn that upside down. I mean, it was saying that you need to only have like two servings of protein a day, and that's it. And then just have all these cereal and pastas, and have more cereal and pasta than even fruits and vegetables. It was, and so in the 80s too,
cereal.
it was kind of it was like the first, like Gen Xers were the first generation to be heavily marketed to from a food standpoint, so all the sugary drinks and snacks that you guys see in the grocery store. Like I remember when those were all first coming out when I was a kid, and you learned about these things on Saturday morning cartoons, and there's always that. They always had incentives too. There'd be this prize at the bottom of the cereal box, or
Cracker Jack dogs.
Right, exactly. So then you tell, and your parents,
remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
your parents thought it was safe, and then I think also too, and meat was very demonized around that time. There was the anti-cholesterol era. I remember growing up, there was parents would limit their kids on how much meat consumption, and even like my mother, she wouldn't let us have more than 3 eggs a week, because there was the thought that if you had more than 3 eggs a week, you'd have sky high cholesterol. So it was like, well, just have another bowl of cereal, right? So backwards in reality, right? And and what did it do? I mean, you could just look at any chart, and from the time that food pyramid started, and then demonization of beef, and then in the 90s, it was kind of the demonization of sugar. So everything had a low fat or baked option in the 90s. That was kind of the craze. And so, a lot of people think that they don't eat as bad as they do, because they've fallen into all these marketing gimmicks. And, I would eat I'm gonna have chips, but at least they're baked Lays. No, they're still freaking chips that were made in a lab. You shouldn't have those at all, right? If you want something somewhat close, just go get a sweet potato, right? But, it's not convenient. We weren't taught that way.
It's crazy how hard it is and how much discipline you have to consistently eat well. Yeah,
it is true, but it's you just got to make it to your lifestyle, And I hear from people that say, "Well, it's not convenient." Well, no, it's not convenient, and I hear from people it's too expensive. Yes and no. I can tell you that if you look at some countries, they spend twice as much as we do on food. They're eating better quality ingredients in their foods, but their healthcare costs are like fractional compared to what we pay. And when it nets food plus healthcare expenses, they're coming out better. And, I can tell you the same thing for me. I go to the doctor once a year just to get my, annual, lab checkup. Sure. And, I used to see my doctor every other month, I mean, there's sometimes I kind of miss the guy because I just don't see him anymore. Right.
That's great. For two guys like Troy and I, we strength train and we run. What would a first cryotherapy session for us typically look like?
Yeah, so you would so your first time, you have to fill out waivers, and then we'll also give you kind of like a safety briefing. But, in and out, you'd be in and out in 20 minutes, 25 minutes, and then after that, it's, before I owned my own cryotherapy place, I would do cryotherapy over my lunch hour, actually, when I was dealing with a car accident injury. Because, you could get, you go in, you have to change, then you get in the cryo chamber. The session lasts 3.5 minutes. Then you get back out, you change, and you're out the door. So really about 10 minutes from entrance to exit.
I'm super intrigued.
Oh, me too. Me too. Any sort of natural remedy, I'm always interested in.
Yeah, and as runners, there's other things I can show you too. Like, are you familiar with compression therapy at all?
Is that cupping?
No, but I like cupping too. So, what compression therapy is, you've probably seen it on TV sometimes when they're showing athletes, like on ESPN rehabbing. But so with compression therapy, we can treat the legs, hips, or arms. The most common though is the legs, and it looks like these giant boots that start down at your toes, go up almost all the way to your waist. And inflates with air, and there's different zones where it's inflating in certain places at certain times. It goes through a repetitive cycle. And in that process, it's massaging your muscles. But the other thing is it's squeezing out lactic acid. So for runners, it's amazing. You get I bring them to me with ultra marathon. So I did that 100-miler this past weekend, mile 60. I'm feeling pretty sore. So I took a 15-minute break, got in compression therapy boots, got back on the road, and my legs felt like I rewound back to about mile 35, mile 40.
Wow.
Yeah, just in that short period of time. So, Saturdays, if I go do a 25, 30-mile training run, obviously I'm a little sore. I'm very sore afterwards. I can do compression therapy, and I'll notice a 25% improvement just right away, and then, continue to use that throughout the week and just bounce back quicker.
There's so much out there that the average Joe doesn't know about. And we're even running and being, decently active, and I don't know about any of this stuff.
Yeah,
maybe I'm just an idiot. But
no, you're not. I didn't know about
That might be the case.
I didn't know.
It probably is. It probably is.
Oh boy, no, I didn't know about any of this stuff either. I mean, it literally took me getting into a car accident I found out about all this by accident. Literally.
Yeah.
Wow, that's pretty ironic.
Yeah.
Wow. When you first opened iCryo, it seems like we've had a couple other entrepreneurs in here too. It seems like starting a business, there's so many moving parts. What part of entrepreneurship and owning the business surprised you the most?
Surprised me the most? That's an interesting question.
Has it been all you expected, or have there been, curveballs here and there?
There's definitely curveballs, but I expected curveballs.
Yeah,
I would say that I didn't expect some of the curveballs that I've had. So that would be it. But, if you go into opening a business thinking it's easy, you shouldn't be opening a business, and I think most people know that. I was expecting that. I think that the one thing that I learned really quickly is that I cannot get myself emotionally invested in what happens in the day by day, right? And what I mean by that is there's days that are going to absolutely suck, right? And that's part of the territory. There's going to be days that are absolutely really good, right? And so it's just trying to stay kind of that medium of the road emotions where I'm not getting too excited and too overconfident because, we've had a couple of good days or had a good month or had a good quarter, right? So I still have that drive, right, to keep moving forward and build the business. But at the same time, man, not letting the lows get me down, and so, my particular business is kind of impacted on the weather. I mean, when the weather is cold and rainy, people, the last thing they want to do is go jump in a cryotherapy chamber, right? So, and then on top of that, much like a lot of small businesses, people aren't window shopping when it's 20 degrees outside and, 30-mile-an-hour winds, right? So, if you have like 4 or 5 days of that in a row as a business owner, that's impacting your business, you just gotta weather the storm and not get emotionally I don't want to say not get emotionally invested because you're invested because it's your business, but you just gotta keep kind of stable, middle of the road. You guys know who Jesse Itzler is?
I feel like I've heard the name.
Okay, you need to read he has 2 books. One of them is called Living with a Seal. He paid David Goggins to live with him for a year. And this
I have heard of this guy.
And this guy's amazing. He's
Was
like
he on Rogan before?
Yes, he's been on Rogan. He's a serial entrepreneur. He's started all kinds of businesses and then married the founder of Spanx. So they're, powerhouse billionaire couple.
Yeah, they're doing all right.
Yeah, they're doing okay. So he lived with Goggins for a month and wrote a book about it. But what he also did was and ironically, I read this book probably about a year before iCryo opened. It's called Living with the Monks. And he went and lived in a monastery, just went off the grid, turned in cell phone, everything, just lived like a monk for 30 days and journaled and wrote about it. And a lot of it was around, just keeping that even-tempered emotion all the time. So I've tried to apply that as a business owner because I used to be the type of person that just get up and down about everything, and just owning a business, you just can't.
That's what I was going to ask. Is that something you've improved on? From the start, you were probably terrible at it, and now you're just better at it.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. It seems like Wichita's full of people with business ideas. I mean, even including us in a way, but sometimes can lack a clear path. Is there something about entrepreneurship you wish you knew before you started?
I would say that I wish that I would have been networking earlier. So I knew that business networking was going to be important, but I wish I started doing my business networking 2-3 months before we opened. Ideally, I should have been networking much sooner than that. Now, in fairness, there was a pandemic in the middle of me developing my business, so that was a bit interrupted. But nonetheless, I should have done that a little bit more. I think that having a short list of people to call that work in different types of industries or different backgrounds and experience, I have some of those resources now to run things by and get ideas from, or even if I need a reliable electrician or plumber, having those types of people in my network. But I didn't necessarily have those people back then, so, but now, I mean, if there's something that comes up, I'm like, oh, you know what, this would be a good, this is something that I should run by Steve, or whoever. So I wish I would have leveraged that and had that network while I was developing and in the early days of pre-marketing and pre-sales of my company. I think that I probably could have started off with a bigger bang.
Do you market to physical therapy offices and those sorts of things? Because you'd think that someone doing PT, you would have a big overlap of clients between them and you.
We do, yeah. We market to PTs, physical therapists, and massage therapists. All three of those specifically. And actually, we have clients that all have those occupations too. So,
oh really?
Yeah. There was one massage therapist in particular. She swears by the concept of, if you do a cryotherapy session before your massage, that she can give you a better massage because there's less inflammation and there's more things that she can do without discomfort if you're regularly doing cryotherapy. We have chiropractors and doctors that come in and physical therapists that come in on a regular basis and use it themselves, but they refer their patients to me because they know that the stuff works.
Right.
Yeah.
How much have you learned about leadership since opening up, being a business owner, probably having a handful of employees? I'm sure you learn a lot about leadership.
Yeah, I think that's always been kind of a constant for me, though. I've been in the corporate world for such a long time, and reading leadership books has always been kind of I haven't read a fiction book since college, and I probably won't ever again. The leadership books and biographies are kind of like my top two, right? So I've always had that. But what I will say is that I've learned different flavors of leadership, that I didn't necessarily have before running the business.
Gotcha. Yeah, I love the autobiographies. I mean, we've got Goggins' first book. We've got plenty of them here too. I'm with you on I like the nonfiction, that stuff that's real.
Yeah, that Goggins book. So, I was telling you guys about that dark spot in my basement, and what I didn't tell you about that story is when, I had that prayer moment. I'm going to use this experience to help other people. Well, I'm like, all right. So I get up off the floor and I'm like, all right, I'm going to do a rehab workout while I'm down here. And David Goggins happened to be on Joe Rogan that week. And I just fired up the Joe Rogan podcast. And so I'm listening, and it's when that book was just getting ready to come out, or it just came out. And
Did you know who he was?
I knew who he was because he had been on Rogan one other time before, but it was just, and he talked a little bit about his story, a little bit about ultra running, but didn't really go kind of deep into like his childhood stuff. And so, I hear him, on there talking about victim mentality, and I'm like, oh my God, that's where I'm at right now. I'm totally that person right now with this injury, So I had, that was the first book I read after that. I think I ordered it on Audible like that day. And the Audible, have you guys done the Audible version of it? So you've read the physical copy. I'd encourage you to go back and do the Audible version, because what's interesting is he doesn't do the audio. He has somebody else do it. But the person who narrates it at the end of each chapter is like a podcast. So they talk about the chapter. And so Goggins just adds on more of that Goggins wisdom to each chapter of the story.
Wow. Speaking of Goggins wisdom, I saw he disappears for, I don't know, a few months. He makes the podcast rounds and then he disappears. And then he resurfaced at the finish line of the Bigfoot 200.
Yeah, it was crazy,
couple
wasn't
weeks back.
I think he got sixth place overall.
David. He's in his 50s, just ran 200 miles, finished way high up in the leaderboard too.
Yeah,
there he is. Just no social media, no nothing. Here I am at the finish line.
Yeah, that guy's
amazing, man.
That guy's once in I don't even know what, man. He's just his own breed.
It takes a really traumatic upbringing like he had to turn into a guy like David Goggins.
Yeah. I mean, like I like to think of myself as a mentally tough person, but I'm nowhere near that guy. I mean, I still have to listen to music when I run. For instance, he goes out and does that Bigfoot race where he's running for, I think, 62 hours or something like that. And yeah, he doesn't even have a smartwatch. He just has like a $20 Walmart little watch just so he can see what time it is. It's crazy.
He's totally broke the human code and busted through to a whole new unexplored mental area.
He might not even be human.
He might not be.
He went through Bud's Hell Week three times.
Yeah.
3 times. I don't know, man. You've got some toughness in you. You ran 100 miles this past weekend. Take us through it.
It was a fun week. Well, so this race was it was part of a series, called the Iron Will Grand Slam. This was the first year of the event, and so there were 4 different 100-mile events as part of this series. And so this year I turned 50, and I was looking. I've had this progression going since I recovered from my injury that I'm going to do the hardest physical challenge of my life every year. Starting in 2020, I did my first 50K. And 2021, I did my first 50 miler. And then at the end of the year, I did my first 100K. Then the following year, I did the Pikes Peak double, where you do the Pikes Peak ascent on a Saturday, and then you do the Pikes Peak marathon on Sunday. And then I followed that up 2 months later with a 24-hour race. So that was 23. Then, that was 22. 23, I did my first 100-miler. 24, I did the hardest 100-miler in Kansas. So I'm like, okay, what am I going to do? Which that one's called Honey Badger. Have you guys heard of Badwater?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Obviously, David Goggins. So They call Honey Badger the Badwater of Kansas because it takes place in mid-July, and it's all on asphalt in Kingman County. It's like one giant rectangle on asphalt in the heat. So I did that in 2024.
God damn, that sounds brutal.
It was fun and brutal. So this year, I was looking for something that would be hard, and this Grand Slam came up, and it just so happened that the first 2 races were before my 50th birthday, and the final 2 were right after my 50th birthday. I'm like, yeah, it sets up nice. So did one in April, May, and then Honey Badger got lumped in as the 3rd race of this series. So last year when I did, I said, I'm never going to do that race again. Had to do it again this year, but it was only like 83 degrees. So it was much more manageable. And then this race this weekend, which actually it was the hottest of the 4 races I did. It was 91 degrees on Saturday. The dew point got up into the 70s during the race as well. And it was on it was on a trail where you're just surrounded by trees. So it blocked any bit of breeze that you had, but that, those trees really held that humidity in there. So I knew it was gonna be hot. So most of the running that I've done since Honey Badger leading up to this race has been like in the evenings after 5 o'clock when it's really hot outside. And then, I stepped up my game with those sauna workouts that I mentioned. And I'm just getting my body used to being hot so I could, do some interval do some heart rate based running. So yeah, the race was at Milford Lake up by Junction City area. Started at 6 on Saturday and started getting really warm at about 11, 12 o'clock. And then that's when I slowed my pace down and kept my heart rate in zone 2 and a little bit of zone 3. And man, I was just watching people just fading, man. People just looking just busted up. And know that feeling because I've been there before. But my pacing just made it, I had a really good hydration plan. 44 ounces every 5 miles, and 300 calories every 5 miles, and just kind of stuck with that plan consistently in the pace and got through the heat. And, this was the 6th 100 miler in total that I've done since running ultras. And, it was, how do I describe it? I was hurting. There was much less pain involved in this one. I felt better. Like I even remember at mile 40 telling my crew, I'm like, man, this is the best I've ever felt at mile 40. And then at mile 50 saying the same thing. And, one of the guys in my crew, he's crewed for me for a majority of these races, and he's paced me a lot. He came in to pace me at mile 80, and he's like, I have never seen you looking this good this late in the race. Was able to finish. There were 23 starters. I took 10th out of the 23 starters. And there were 11 people that signed up to do that 4 race challenge, the Iron Will challenge. And only 2 of us finished. But I like to say I was the first one to win the award because the other guy who finished the slam finished the last race a little bit after me. So I'm the inaugural Iron Will Grand Slammer.
Man,
hell of an accomplishment, man.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate that. Very, very blessed to even be able to do that. God's put me in a good spot and in the recovery. And, I just try to be obedient and just try to, leave a good example and inspire other people. And it's kind of my therapy. It's a lot cheaper than therapy to just go out and run. And I'll tell you what, too, last week, probably an emotional week for most people, between all the things going on in this country and 9/11. And I'll tell you what, man, I unplugged from it all Friday night, when I got to my hotel room, and I didn't check back in with anything going on in the world until Monday morning. And just having that disconnect and just being in nature, doing something really, really hard, pushing myself, knowing that I'm doing something that like less than 0.01% of people are ever going to do. I don't know. It was peaceful and, fresh new energy, fresh new perspective to start out the new week, yesterday.
That's a great thing to do.
That is.
Especially after a week like last week. When I was prepping for this, I read an article that after your accident, doctors told you never run marathons again.
Yeah.
Looking back on that now and seeing what you're doing, last week running 100 miles, how does that make you feel?
Well, I went to one of those doctors last year. I had, part of it was I wanted to see my original x-ray, so I went in there and, just kind of, and I like the guy. I don't want to throw shade at him, but, he just old traditionalist, right? And I think that probably some of the advice that he was giving me was based around the fact that most people aren't going to work as hard as they do to, most people, when they have an injury, they just want somebody to fix them. They don't want to necessarily fix themselves. And, not a lot of people are going to, if you give me all these physical therapy moves, I'm going to do them all twice a day. They're not going to have that drive that I necessarily did. So I think that probably some of it's rooted in that and some of it's rooted in the system that we talked about earlier. But, I just wanted him to know that I did fully recover. And, I told him like, And actually, I set up the appointment as a reeval appointment. So I had him do a whole reevaluation on me. He's just blown away at like my flexibility and just my range of motion and just how I'm able to do this and that in these movements without feeling any pain. And then I told him, I said, well, I've ran, at that point, I think I was just 100 miler in. And he's like, you shouldn't be able to do that. Like, you were too messed up. And, so anyways, I had just recently had got, and I'll show you guys after the show, but I had recently had got an x-ray from the chiropractor I see now. And so I asked that doctor, I'm like, is there any possibility that you could pull up my original x-ray? And so he did, and I took a picture of it. And on that x-ray, you could see that my hips aren't aligned, like one's dropped lower than the other. You could see curvature in the spine. You could see like specifically my S1, my L4, and my L5 are just like all crunched up on top of each other, right? And then you look at the x-ray at the beginning of 2024, this updated one, and it is perfect hip alignment, perfect straight spine. You look at all those discs and they're perfectly straightened out. So I showed him that picture. He was just blown away that, I was able to do that. But, I think, a lot of it's hard work, a lot of it's prayer, a lot of it's trust in God. It just, and man, just glad I didn't do that surgery or take them pills, right? Because then it would have been a whole different story.
Totally.
You're
Total
exactly
fork in the road
right.
moment.
Mm-hmm.
You're exactly right, man. Well, you got anything, Troy?
I don't. Incredible stuff.
You got anything
Really.
for us?
I think we covered most things, unless there's anything else.
Well, we'll see
you think of in the health and wellness space. I know that some of the things I talked about were new to you guys. So if you guys ever want to come by, I can set up a time, give you guys a tour, and
Oh, that'd be great.
We can hang out in the sauna together and whatever. So yeah, let me know when you want to make that happen, and we can schedule that. So
that'd be great.
And maybe follow it up with a run or a run beforehand.
Yeah. Heck yeah.
Well, Matt, you have overcame more adversity than most people ever will. Congratulations on all your success, and thank you so much for taking the time to jump on here with us.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. It was a lot of fun today.
Awesome.
Thank you. We'll see you in October.
All right.
Yep.
Sounds good.
All right.
See ya.